On today's show, Luigi reflects.
We continue to discuss specs and Link teaches hex.
Hello and welcome to 8-Bit Crisis. I'm Link.
And I'm Luigi, and we're here to help you explore the era of 8-bit computing, when Amstrad, Acorn, Commodore and Sinclair ruled the digital waves.
That's right, and it's lovely to have you with us on this, the last episode of Series 1. We're there already. 6 episodes in, can you believe it, Luigi?
It's gone really, really fast.
It has, hasn't it? Yeah? We've had a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah.
So, before we jump into Let's Cheer for the Gear, episode 6, I'd just like you to give a bit of a summary of your thoughts of what it's been like to do a series on YouTube.
So, I've found it really enjoyable. Hopefully, you, the viewers, have enjoyed it just as much as me, but I've also learnt something. I've had a lot of fun with the games, and I remember at the beginning of the series I was completely certain that modern games were a lot better, but I've come to realise that the older 8-bit games were just as fun, some of them even more fun than some of the modern games.
And what's been your favourite so far?
Favourite game?
We've still got one more to go.
Favourite game from now, probably, there's a reason it's ranked top at the moment, that's Jetpack.
Jetpack, great. Yeah, it's a fantastic game. And we've been playing a few other games in the background and looking at some other bits and pieces as well. So you have had quite a good bit of experience on different systems, haven't you? And we have said that we want to buy an Amstrad CPC as well. So would you recommend it to other people your age to jump in and have a go?
If you're watching and you're my age, even if you're younger, I'd say at least try try Jetpack, because it's probably the most fun that I've had on one of them. So just see what it's like and how much you like it. Excellent.
Thank you very much for that. I'm glad you've liked it. It means a lot to me. I hope you've liked it as well. We have been looking at the biggest players in the UK microcomputing market from the 1980s. We think it's right now that we give some honourable mentions to the other manufacturers and systems that were out there. And that's going to be the topic of this week's Let's Cheer for the Gear. So let's jump straight into it, Luigi. We're going to have a quick run through some other computers that existed, coming from different parts of the world. We've got America, Japan, Hong Kong, different places in there as well. Okay, so we'll jump over to the computer, and I just want to show you some of the other computers from the time, okay? So we're going to go way back now to sort of pre-golden age 8-bit, and we're going to talk about Apple, and we're going to talk about IBM, because they were two massive names at the time. So this is a picture of what's called the Apple I computer that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created. And it actually came as this circuit board here, and therefore lots of people created their own cases for the actual computer to go in. So it's like an old Raspberry Pi style thing that they were buying, and then they came out with the Apple II a little bit later. Now these were pretty good computers actually. 1977 they came out. They had the 5.25-inch disk drive, only 4 kilobytes of RAM initially. And they also boast the first ever example of spreadsheet software, so a bit like Excel, but it was called VisiCalc. The issue with these computers is in today's money they would have cost £5,000 or close to $6,000. So they were massively expensive in the later 70s, and therefore most people that I knew didn't have them. Okay, IBM is another name, and they also had a similar kind of issue with cost, but they were heavily involved in the business side of computing. They have a history that encapsulates lots and lots of innovation that has influenced the industry over the years. Yeah, no experience of them either from my perspective.
Yeah, they look like the things that almost you see in like older cartoons and stuff, and like in a school library or something they'll have a
absolutely small, yeah, it's that sort of thing, isn't
box.
It? Yeah, you see it in the films as well from the 1970s. Going back to Apple, there was the Macintosh, which is well worth pointing out. So the Macintosh was the first computer that didn't really come with a bundled language, so you didn't have to issue commands straight away, and it had a basic style, not to be confused with basic language, but a basic style graphical user interface as well. But other Other computer companies were up to similar things as maybe Commodore or Spectrum were doing. So let's have a look at this company here, Tandy.
Isn't that Didn't young Sheldon have a Tandy?
He did, yeah, that's right. He did have a Tandy. The one I'm showing here is the TRS-80, which was a popular one again from the late 1970s that continued for a few years. But I think young Sheldon, if I'm not wrong, had the 1000, Tandy 1000 SL.
Sounds
which
right.
was, I think it was about 1984 that one came out. But they were all 8-bit computers. Lots of children had a lot of fun on them, similar to Texas Instruments and their 99.4 and 99.4A, which were similar computers, I suppose quite comparable to your Spectrums and your Amstrads of the time. So now going to South Wales, near Swansea, there was actually a company called Dragon, which is quite a cool name. The Dragon 32 and the 64 they came out with. What do you think the 32 and the 64 relates to?
Probably the kilobytes of RAM.
Absolutely, yep. So you had a smaller one and a bigger one. Tangerine Auric, well, they had the Auric 1 and the Auric Atmos, which had quite strange membrane keyboards on them. I think some kids had them and they played their games on them. Jupiter Ace was another computer that didn't really sell particularly well. Do you remember when we were speaking to Peter Leeper and he was talking about fourth language and using fourth to help with his Boulder Dash build? Well, that computer actually came bundled with the fourth language instead of basic, but it didn't sell very well at all. And then we start moving more overseas to places we haven't been yet, with Sword and the M5. This was a company from Japan, quite a limited run really. It used the Zilog Z80 processor, a bit like the Spectrum did. Quite limited RAM on that. There was Color Genies as well. There was a project called the Enterprise by Intelligent Software, which I think was around about 1983, if I'm not wrong. That was another UK based one. And then we've got this really powerful computer that came out quite late in 1989 called the Sam Coupe by MGT. Yeah, now this had either 256 kilobytes of RAM or 512. So it was really, really powerful, but it was an 8-bit computer coming out in 1989, so it didn't really stand much of a chance. They're very expensive now, I think, if you want to buy them. And then there's just one more honourable mention. So you remember when we went to see your friend, and your friend's dad is Spanish?
Yeah.
And he was being told about this project, and he said he used to have an MSX computer.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember I asked him which one? And he wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's because MSX wasn't actually a manufacturer or a type of computer. It was actually a standard of computer that was developed. And the idea was that if you had different MSX computers being made by different manufacturers, they'd have lots of compatibility with software. So you'd still be able to use the same software, use the computers in the same way, but you might have a Sony MSX or a Yamaha MSX or a Canon MSX. And I know that you know all of those names. Yeah, so it was almost like an early take on, I suppose, what Bill Gates did with Windows and creating PCs that can be made by different companies, but still are compatible with Windows and all the other applications that uses, yeah? And if we had time, we could also talk about games consoles as well, but we can't. You know that there's so many games consoles as well, we could fill another series with those, but obviously the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Master System and things like that, they were 8-bit consoles. There were Ataris as well, which Peter Leeper was talking about. Maybe
if people want that, we can do one on consoles.
Yeah, so there you go. That's all of the, or generally all of the microcomputer scene in a quick episode.
Yeah.
All right. No more questions?
No, I don't think I have many. Actually, no, I don't think I have any.
No. Okay. Well, look.
Other than one thing, why do most of them use the word Atmos? There's quite a few of them that have there's the Apple Atmos, is it? Not the Apple Atmos. Acorn Atmos.
There's the Acorn Atom.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the Auric Atmos and the Acorn Atom. There's quite a lot of A's, isn't there? Amiga, Atari, Atmos. It could be a coincidence, but When I was a child, there was something called the Yellow Pages, which was like a phone directory, phone directory for businesses.
I think you've told me this, yeah.
And companies would often name themselves with a name beginning with A, so that they were at the top of the list for their particular industry type or business type. Bit of extra information for you there, but now we go on to how does it work, and we're going to have a look at tapes and discs and cartridges. How does it work? Magnetic media. Discuss.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
No.
No. So are you aware that tapes that we use on our computers are magnetic?
Yes.
Yeah? But you've never considered what that means?
No.
No. Okay. So tapes and discs, they are magnetic media, and when we record onto them, we subtly change the magnetization of the metal oxides which are on that tape. Okay? And then when they get played back, that subtle magnetic change can be picked up by what's called the head that reads the tape. Okay? And you know how a sound wave, which is like compressed air pushing itself backwards and forwards across the air as it comes towards your ears, can be represented by that sound wave that we see. We see it on our software actually when we do our editing. Yeah. Well, that wave that's represented there can actually be interpreted by a computer if it has an analog to digital converter. So it can actually study the wave and turn it into numerical values, so that if it then plays back those numerical values, it could, in theory, turn it back into an analog system and back into a sound. Okay, so that's the principle of how magnetic media works, but you do need that converter in the computer to turn it into binary digital data. Okay, so we know that we can save our programs onto tape, and we can retrieve them from tape, and we can also use discs as well, can't we? So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. The tapes, they were cheap to produce, but what was the big problem with the tapes? What have you encountered?
I've encountered that they're hard to get back to a certain point.
If you don't have a counter? Yeah, okay.
And also they like wear away, don't they? At the point.
Yeah, and what's the other big problem when you want to play a game and you want to get on with it?
It takes a long time to load.
They're slow, aren't they? Yeah. And that's because a tape will only load onto something like the Commodore 64 at 300 bits per second. Yeah, so maybe 38 bytes per second, which is really slow. So if you have a game that's say 20 kilobytes on your tape, that's going to take about 9 minutes to load up. Yeah, but they were quite cheap, and that's why, especially in the UK, lots of people were saving and loading through tapes. What's the alternative? What was the other option?
Disc, like floppy disks.
Good, yeah, and you've seen them, haven't you? We don't actually have any here yet. Maybe later on in our life cycle of our channel we may well have them, but we don't have any discs at the moment. But I know you've seen them, and we'll put some pictures up on the screen. Now, if you take those cardboard discs apart, they were 5¼ inch discs back then, on most systems. You could actually take out what looked like a little vinyl record, but it was very thin and flimsy and made of plastic.
Yeah.
And it was also magnetic media. But the discs, they could rotate at 300 revolutions per minute, and they could transfer over 10 times as much data. So they were 10 times faster at loading. Yeah, so your 9-minute program would take under a minute to load. Back in the 1980s, why don't you think many children had disk drives and discs on their microcomputers?
Because they were too big to keep around, maybe?
Not really, no. They were a similar size, but the issue is they were 10 times faster, but they were also 10 times as expensive to buy, the disk drive. In fact, the disk drives cost nearly as much as the actual computers did in the first place. And that was a hard sell to parents back then who just bought you a computer if you then said, oh, can I have a disk drive as well? And that's going to cost you the same amount again. Remember, these computers were costing like £1,000 in today's money. So you'd be asking for a disk drive for, I don't know, £700 or £800 equivalent, something like that. Okay. But what was the alternative? So if you didn't have a tape or a disk drive, what did some other computers have? Do you know?
Did they have CDs?
No. No. CDs were knocking about, I think, in the 80s. Could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now I'm saying that, I'm thinking, is it like 1990? I'm sure they would have been invented though by then.
I'm not sure then.
No, cartridges.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so cartridges are a special case because they don't have magnetic media.
I thought cartridges and tapes were like the same thing.
No, not at all.
Oh, now I know what you mean by a cartridge, like the things that you put in Nintendo.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, so in the Commodore you could stick a cartridge in the back of it, and other systems had cartridges. Atari used cartridges a lot, but they weren't magnetic media. Inside the cartridge was actually memory banks of ROM. Do you remember what ROM stands for? Think back. Or can you tell me what it is?
ROM is the... Oh, I can't remember. Isn't it the short-term memory of the
No,
computer?
it's long-term.
Oh.
If you'd thought it through, you would have thought, why would you want short-term memory on a cartridge? Because you might bring it home and then erase it, yeah? So it's actually non-deletable or read-only memory, which is what ROM stands for, yeah? So they actually almost were like an extension of RAM, because you had it on there, and when you plugged it in, the CPU could just use that straight away and not have to load the data from a tape. So you could have cartridges instead, working on a form of ROM. Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. There we go. It's time to play your last game of the series, and I've got a great one for you.
Okay, Link has promised me a blast with this one. This game is called Enforcer by Full Metal Megablater by the Master, also known as Manfred Trenz. So let's hop into the game.
Manfred Trenz is a German designer. He also made some really famous games on the Commodore, such as Turrican, R-Type, Katakis, and the Great Guiana Sisters, which some of you may know as a little bit of a copy, just a blatant copy of Super Mario Brothers, with female characters in it, and it ended in a court case. But he made these games later on in the life cycle of 8-bit computing, and I think you can tell that he's just absorbed all of the learnings about what works with graphics and how to get the most sound out of the machine and the speed and the most stuff happening on screen at the same time. He clearly just pulled everything together that the system was capable of and put it all into one game. Would you agree, Luigi?
Yeah, I would. I think just wouldn't.
I am rather cross that you still have a life left and you've already got about 3 times as much as I managed to get on my first ever attempt.
Oh, I forgot to use the nukes.
Yes, so if you hit the space bar on this, you fire what's called a smart bomb, and you'll see at the bottom that you've got 3 smart bombs, and they will kill everything on the screen. So you've collected some upgrades, so now you're firing 2 bullets at an angle. The more you upgrade the craft, the easier it is to get through the level, as long as you can avoid rocks and ledges and everything else.
No, give me that.
So that gives you a bit of a shield, I think, the blue ones.
Yeah, I think it decreases damage. Oh no, I'm about to lose my first life.
How do you feel about the graphics and sound?
Feels like almost a what's it called, bit?
16-bit?
Yeah, it feels like a 16-bit. To me at least.
I agree. I think if I had seen this on my Super Nintendo in 1993, I think I would have been pretty happy with this game. But it's on a Commodore 64, which is frankly astounding. The graphics and the sound, which I think you'll agree are pretty good. Do you like the sound?
Yeah, I really like the sound. It sounds amazing.
Proper 1980s synth rock, isn't it? It's lots of voices in there, lots of very 1980s synthesizer sounds. Let's see if you can get onto the high score table.
Oh, I accidentally pressed the mini nuke by accident.
What's the mini nuke?
The smart bomb, as you call it, I call it the nuke because it just deletes everything.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. So should, if you can get to this point before you get to the asteroid belt, it's easier to get through. I haven't completed level 1 yet. I read there are 6 levels to play. I couldn't find a way to contact Manfred Trenz to see if he wanted an interview. I did see some evidence online that he's generally not very open to the idea anyway. Which is fine. I mean, not everyone wants to talk about their job that they did 40 years ago. I don't really want to talk about my job I did 20 years ago, so that's fine.
You don't talk much about your job that you do now.
I try not to bore you with the details, that's true.
Oh no. Not an infested diggers. I am being chased down, and I'm not happy about it. Oh.
Very good. So I think we'll stop there. Very good. Okay, so let's do some scoring on this, the last game of the series. So let's start with concept and originality.
Concept. It's a lot. Saying it's one of the later games of the era. I've seen games that are almost the same as it, so I'd probably say maybe a 7 for originality.
7. I think that's fair because this is a side-scrolling horizontal shoot 'em up.
Yeah.
It isn't even the first one that Mr. Trenz did. He actually did another one called Katarkis, and this is kind of considered to be Katarkis 2. So yeah, I think that's fair, but it is a very good example of one of these games. Good. What about graphics?
Graphics is a 10. When you showed me the first, even the front screen of this, I thought it was 16-bit. I thought this was part of something from the SNES or NES.
Yeah. And how about sound?
Sound, once again, 10.
10, okay, right.
Because I think I gave Frack 10 and this has better sound, so I have to give it, if there was an option, I'd give it a 15, but...
I think it's tune versus style. This one, it is a good tune, but it's just the style of it is cool and all the different voices, whereas Frack has a really good tune that's performed in quite a simple way. Yeah. What about the playability?
Playability, the only problem I've found is it feels like it goes up more quicker than it goes down. I don't know if that's just me, so I'll give it a 9. Because that's the only problem I've found with the playability.
It's really fast, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you feel like you still have most of the control you want.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how it should be in an aircraft. If you're in an aircraft, or it doesn't respond immediately to everything you do. So I think it feels good. And then lastly,
fun. 10.
10?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I found it amazing. It's the best game I think I've played so far.
Happy. Yeah, so you've given it a score of 46, which is great. What a way to finish.
Yeah.
Last game of the series, so I need to try and beat this now in the next series for you, don't I?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Luigi. I'm glad you liked it. So Luigi, in the last episode we looked at the difference between high-level languages like BASIC and Python and low-level languages like Zilog and Moss, where you actually use binary essentially. We're going to look at an example of assembly language which sits in the middle, and we use hexadecimal to code. So we're going to jump straight over to the Commodore 64 and we're going to load up an application called Supermon, which will allow us to actually get close to the metal, as they say, and program at a assembly language level. So here we go. It looks like we're still in BASIC because it says Commodore BASIC at the top, but if we try and type basic commands now, such as print hi, we get a question mark error because we're no longer in BASIC, so the computer doesn't understand anymore. So if I type R, enter, just to bring up the stuff that's above, we're now in the CPU. And we can see what the different registers in the CPU have in them. So the PC is the program counter, there's SR, there's ACXR. These are different bits of memory within the CPU, and we don't need to understand too much about what they're all for at the moment. If we look at the accumulator, which is AC, what value would you say is currently held in the accumulator?
40.
40. Yeah, it looks like 40, doesn't it? But actually this is not a decimal number. This is a hexadecimal number. And the way hexadecimal works is that your units don't go up to 9 before you add another number to the left. That's decimal. Yeah, so if you go up to 9, then you add a 1 on the left hand side and it becomes 10. And then you go up to 19 and then it becomes 20. Hexadecimal, you actually go up to 16 before you add a number to the left. And the way that you do that is you count 0, 1, 2 all the way up to 9, and then you count A, B, C, D, E, F, and then you add a 1 to the number on the left hand side. Okay? So that's why we call it hexadecimal, as in 6 decimal, because it's counting through 16. Okay, and that's why you can actually see the number F6 in the stack pointer, which is the entry on the right hand side. Okay, yeah. But it could have easily been 6F. That would also make sense. Sounds a bit strange, but people who program get used to this quite quickly. All right. The reason we have this system is that each of these 2-digit numbers represents 1 byte of data. And each individual number, so the 4 and the 0 for example, they represent nibbles. So a nibble is half a byte. Yeah, I know someone was having a joke when they came up with that. But when you see 40, it's actually going to be 64 in decimal, because it's 4 times 16 plus 0. That's 2 nibbles. And the reason we have nibbles is that if you've got 4 binary digits, 0101 or 1001 or any combination, there's actually 16 different combinations that you can come up with 4 binary digits, and therefore you can express a nibble as a number from 0 up to F in the way we just described. Okay, that makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So we've got values in there at the moment, and we know that we've got RAM locations, and the RAM locations can also be expressed as hexadecimal, but it's a 16, if you remember we had 16 bits as a memory address, so therefore you'd have 4 nibbles. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at what's stored in a certain location in this computer at the moment. So by typing in M for memory and looking at the location 0380, not to be confused with 380, because this is a hexadecimal number, you can see that there's lots and lots of empty bytes here. Okay, 0380 is 00. 0381 is also 00. And you can see that on each line you get 8 bytes, and then it tells you that the next row starts at location 0388 in RAM, and that's all 0 as well. This is great because we want to use this for a little test on machine language. So we're going to actually, what we can do here is manually update what's in each byte. So I'm going to put 11 and 99 in these 2 bytes of data. I'm going to press enter, and they're there now. Okay, if I type M0380 to check, it should. There they are. So I've now updated those bytes of data. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah.
Good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write myself a little program in assembly. And I happen to know that I can use what's called the tape cassette buffer in Commodore 64 to write short programs. So I'm going to actually start at location 033C to write a program. And I've done that a little bit wrong. I'm no expert on this, you know. It's going to take me a little while to get used to it. I have to type in A for assemble. Otherwise it will think I'm writing directly into machine language rather than assembly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the accumulator in the CPU with this mnemonic or instruction. So I'm saying load accumulator with the value that's in 0380. Which value is that in 0380 at the moment?
That is the 1199.
Well, 11 is 0380. That's 1 byte.
Okay.
Yeah, if I went to 0381, that would be the 99.
Oh yeah.
So it's it's actually translated that into machine language. So where it says AD8003, That's actually the opcode for load into the accumulator, and then 8003 is the same as 0380, but it switches the high byte and the low byte around in machine code. My next instruction is I want to load the X register in the CPU. I want to load with 0381, which is where we held the other value. So I've now loaded my values into the CPU, or at least I will do if I run the program. Make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm now going to run the program. I'm going to go to 033C. This is how we ask the program to run. I'm going to press enter. Would you look at that? So now it's showing us our CPU again, and we've loaded 11 into the accumulator. Oh no, we haven't. Correct yourself, Link. We've loaded 11 because this is hexadecimal into the accumulator, and we've loaded 99 into the X register. Okay. Now I'm going to write a program again. So I'm going to start again. I want to, in 033C, I want to store the accumulator I'm panicking. To store the accumulator into 0381, and then I want to store what's in the X register into 0380, and then I'm going to run that. I'm going to go to 033C. Okay, notice that what's in the accumulator in the X register hasn't changed, because that's just what I loaded in there before. So that's still in there. But now if I go to 0380, we should see that the 11 and the 99 have now switched places. So I brought both values into different locations within the CPU, and then I sent them back into the different location that they weren't in previously, so they've swapped places within RAM. I get that that's not the most exciting thing in the world, right? But what I want you to understand is that what we've done there is hugely efficient. If you asked BASIC to do that, and then you had a look at the code that BASIC had to run through to do that, it would be much, much longer than the simple instructions that we put into the Commodore in order to achieve it in machine language. So that's just a simple introduction to hexadecimal and machine language. All right, any thoughts?
Well, it's very difficult. That's the main thought that comes to mind. It looks very, very difficult.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. And what Jim says, who wrote the book on machine language, he says that if you take people who learn machine language first and then show them BASIC, they find it much harder to transition to BASIC. They'll complain that BASIC doesn't really make sense. Whereas if somebody has learnt BASIC and then you reveal to them that machine language is available, normally they're grateful and go, oh wow, this is so much simpler and makes so much more sense, and I can get much more power from my computer with it. Yeah. So it's just about learning to think like a computer, and then you can program at speed. All right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good. Well done. I know that's hard, but it's something I thought was useful to teach you. All right? Good.
We've had loads of fun with Series 1, but as you know, it has to come to an end. So we'd like to ask you to share it with your friends, to subscribe, to like, and we know some things haven't gone so well, so we're going to try and use your feedback to get better, and so we will be taking a couple of weeks to complete Series 2, but we will be posting more material in other formats for you to watch, so please watch that.
Something a little bit different.
Yeah. And so thank you very much. Until next time, happy gaming.